The Alberta government recently sent its audit of arches and the Lethbridge supervised consumption site to the Lethbridge Police Service to see if criminal charges could potentially be laid. Now, the recent audit revealed that there was $1.6 million worth of government funding that went unaccounted for. To discuss this in a little more detail is our province's Justice Minister, Doug Schweitzer, joining me from Calgary. Thanks a lot for your time, Doug.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me on today.
You bet. Now, what kind of criminal charges are we potentially talking about here in regards to arches and the supervised consumption site?
Well, when you take a look at this, I mean, it's all for now to the police to conduct their investigation, and you don't want to, kind of pre-guess what those charges could be. So it's over to the police now to conduct their investigation to determine whether or not charges would be appropriate in this situation. But it just makes your blood boil, though, when you see, taxpayer dollars go into an organization that is supposed to be used to help, the most vulnerable people in our society, those people that are struggling with addictions, and yet you're seeing trips to Portugal, you're seeing, massive six-figure salaries, and you're seeing money that they can't account for. That's the appropriate step was to send this to the police to see if charges are appropriate in the situation. It's absolutely frustrating, and you know what? And we've also heard the stories of how this has impacted the downtown of Lethbridge and what the consumption site has done to deter small businesses and make people uncomfortable in the downtown. That's why we've done a different approach with our strategy around treatment. And I think we're going to talk a little bit about drug treatment courts and other methods here to get people treatment. It's just not a matter of facilitating drug consumption. It's a matter of giving people treatment and a hope for a future.
Yeah, I know Premier Kenney's also talked about the potential of a mobile SCS being set up here in Lethbridge if potentially that Arches and the SCS shuts down as it currently stands now. Let's talk about those drug treatment courts. We're talking about opening up one here in Lethbridge. In your opinion, why are they so important?
Well, they have an amazing track record of actually getting people well. So right now in our justice system, you always hear about people that round through the system. They come in, they come out, come in and out. And what this does, it takes somebody that's truly struggling with an addiction and it puts them through a court supervised process for about 12 to 18 months where they have to come and report to a judge on a weekly basis saying, this is what I've done to get better. This is what I've done to get well.
So accountability, right?
Oh, it's a whole accountability. And for many of these people, it's actually far harder than just going and serving a sentence. Because if you go and serve a sentence, you don't have to deal with why you're there in the first place in many instances. So in the success rate for those that graduate, 70% of them never come back into the criminal justice system again. So it's really a matter of getting these people well. And when they graduate, many of them reconnect with family, which is so important. They reconnect with family, they get jobs, and they have housing. So they have stability in their lives.
So some of these drug treatment courts, are we actually taking a model from somewhere in the States or Europe?
Well, they originated in the United States for the ones that we based our model on here, but we have a track record of over a decade in Calgary and Edmonton. So we've doubled the capacity in Calgary and Edmonton, and now we're reaching out and we're going to establish one in Lethbridge. We've announced one in Red Deer, and we're going to launch a few more as well in our mid-sized centers.
Now, the UCP recently announced that it has new laws in place to protect rural property owners from crime. Explain how this new law ensures protections for property owners and ensures that trespassers face consequences for their actions.
Well, we heard this loud and clear. Last year, we did a big tour talking about rural crime and hearing from Albertans as to what they were facing. So we've done lots of different pieces to tackle rural crime. We put in place a rapid force, which is going to get 400 new sheriffs on the ground. We have a new rural police funding model as well, which is going to get another 300 police officers into our rural communities. And then when it comes to property rights as well, I mean, I'm not sure if you remember the Eddie Maurice situation where an individual fired a warning shot because he was tired of his property being stolen. And then the person that initially he faced charges himself. Initially, those ultimately were dropped. But then the person came after him with a civil claim and said, you know what, I'm going to sue you now. And so really, when you see this, we said, look, the balance is not working here. The people that are committing these crimes have more rights than the victims. So we've rebalanced it here in Alberta. So if you take reasonable steps now to protect your property, if you take reasonable steps and you're not charged criminally yourself, you then cannot be pursued for a civil claim. We made sure we had the strongest property rights there. We've also enhanced trespassing laws. So if somebody continues to trespass on your property, that individual is going to face serious penalties and fines. So we really want to make sure we have the strongest possible property rights in the province of Alberta.
Now, one of these bills passed, was this precipitated because of all of the protests taking place at Hutterite turkey farms?
Well, the Jumbo Valley turkey farm was one of those instances we had. But the thing is, though, you go to every community and you hear a story like this, where people, they're being targeted. Our farmers in Alberta are amazing at what they do. They follow the highest of standards. yet they're being, targeted by these, small special interest groups that don't like farming, they don't like farmers for some reason, they don't like how animals are treated. You can't keep these people happy. You can't negotiate with them. So yeah, we put in place penalties as well, where if you go and trespass on a farmer's property and you're going in there like this is an occupation of their property and their land. You're really making sure that we can go after those organizations to say, no, not in Alberta, not ever. Our farmers are the foundation of why we are even our province. So let's make sure we give them the protection they deserve.
Now, there are fines and potential jail time as well. Let's talk a bit about those.
Yeah, so we have fines in place. So initially, I mean, the fines were just kind of basic, smaller numbers, but now we actually have the ability to find the organizations that are facilitating these things. So really, when you go and look at this, Alberta has the strongest protections now in place in the country. We also, if you remember back to earlier this year when we had all those rail blockades going on, we had people blockading people's ability to get to work, and all these special interest groups, their whole goal was to shut down the economy. So what we did is, we brought in place the Critical Infrastructure Defense Act, where if organizations are purposely, illegally blockading, critical infrastructure, those organizations are going to face thousands of dollars worth of fines every single day that they do that.
Now, many rural Albertans I've spoken with are angry at the Liberal government and their new gun ban, banning over, 1,500 types of guns. These farmers and ranchers say they need the guns to protect themselves, as we talked about earlier, their families and their livestock. Since RCMP may be 30 minutes to an hour away if an intruder shows up in a threatening manner. Now, what are you hearing? Are legal, responsible gun owners still upset?
Oh, I mean, when we met earlier this year with Minister Blair, the Minister of Public Safety, and Minister Lametti, the Federal Minister of Justice. So we met with these Liberal justice ministers, and we told them, consult widely in Alberta. Make sure that you go out there and you listen to people and you do this thoughtfully. Instead, what we got was a rushed policy with kind of half-baked, with no clarity as to what the end result is going to be. So all of a sudden you have a bunch of people that are lawful, firearms owners, and now all of a sudden, they don't know up from down. They don't know how they're supposed to hand these firearms back in, or if they should. So really, this just caused chaos in our lawful firearm community. And on top of that, it doesn't get to the root cause of crimes that are being committed with firearms, because 80% of the crimes that are being committed with firearms, those guns are illegally brought in from the United States. So we told our federal counterparts, look, if you're serious about going after gun crime, you have to go after organized crime. On top of that, you have to make sure you crack down on the border. That's really the big cause here of firearm use in Canada. And we told them that. They ignored our advice. So that's why we've brought in place a chief firearms officer for the province of Alberta. Initially, this program was run by the federal government, but we're going to take ownership of that here. More Alberta, less Ottawa. We're going to take ownership of this, and we're going to put a chief firearms officer in place from Alberta.
Now, Premier Jason Kenney is looking into a potential provincial police force similar to what Ontario is using right now, what we had many years ago. What would that look like, replacing the RCMP, Doug?
Well, this is one of those things. We had our Fair Deal panel last year and into early this year that went out and talked to Albertans, and they came back recommending that Alberta set up an Alberta Police Service here for the province to replace the RCMP. So right now, my department is looking through, what does that mean? What is the cost of that going to be? What's the infrastructure that we have to set up? Training facilities, forensic labs, police stations. So we're looking into doing our homework right now, and by early to mid next year, we'll have that report for cabinet, and we'll be able to make a decision whether or not it makes sense to proceed with an Alberta Police Service.
So just off the top of your head, what are some of the advantages of having a provincial police force over the RCMP?
Well, I think the biggest thing you hear is stability, and it's the continuity where you have somebody from your community that's going to be on your police service. Quite often now, the RCMP, they do good work, but quite often they'll have people that aren't from Alberta, and they won't know where the different towns are. They won't know where, how the community fabric that brings it all together. They won't have that continuity. The other thing too with the Alberta Police Service is that it'll also allow us to keep people here longer. The RCMP, they send people all over Canada. It'll provide that greater continuity as well.
Some people I talked to, some of the critics are saying that the advantage of the RCMP, you've got this national database, so it's easy to reach out to different jurisdictions. If somebody's wanted, let's say in Swift Current, Saskatchewan, Halifax, Nova Scotia, we've got this national database, but that's not going to be the case with the provincial police force. It'll be harder because you have to deal with different, police services across the country.
Well, and you know what? This is one of those things that we have technology now that allows databases to talk to each other. It's something that we could very easily figure out. I mean, even in Alberta, we have, you got the Tabor police, you've got Lethbridge, you got Medicine Hat, you have all these different municipal ones, and we find a way to communicate with each other when there's particularly when you have an individual that is definitely needed to be brought in. So we have a way to communicate with each other. I'm not concerned about our ability to have databases talk to each other.
So Doug, what steps is the province taking to eliminate the shortage of prosecutors?
So we campaigned on bringing in 50 new prosecutors in the province of Alberta. So we're actually actively hiring right now to bring in these additional prosecutors. But it's similar to if you wanted to grow your police service, you have to recruit as well. So we've actually doubled the number of students that we have coming in. So young lawyers that graduated law school, and we're having them go to different communities across Alberta. So we've doubled the capacity. And next year, we're actually going to have the largest articling student class in the entire province, larger than any of the private law firms as well, to make sure that every year we bring in more talent to be able to fill our ranks of prosecutors. For too long, we just weren't recruiting enough. And as a result, we kind of had this slow depletion in our ranks of prosecutors where we couldn't keep up with the caseload. So we're changing that strategy. We're also out there hiring more prosecutors as well so we can deal with cases, because the former government under the NDP brought in what they called a triage, where they would just simply drop the non-priority cases. And we've heard loud and clear from Albertans that if the police go through the time to find someone, to charge them, that they want to make sure that the full extent of the law is pursued by our prosecutors. And a lot of that is making sure they have the capacity themselves to handle the caseload.
The COVID-19 pandemic has been a big challenge for many Albertans, many Canadians, and all around the world, but there's still also a big drug crisis in many towns and cities across our province, including here in Lethbridge. Now, our Mayor, Chris Spearman, was saying how much of a need there is for a full-time scan unit in our city to help permanently shut down the drug houses, because right now, they shut down one and another one opens up three doors down the block, and it's just a vicious cycle. Is one forthcoming?
So on that front there, I mean, we have Scan that provides services. We did shut down a house in Lethbridge earlier this year. We are actually investing though in the Alberta Law Enforcement Response Team. This is a coordinated effort between different policing agencies. It's very technical, specific, and they go after organized crime. They've had an immense amount of success as well. So when you see the big busts that get the drugs and the guns off the street, quite often the Alberta Law Enforcement Response Team is behind it. And we actually just made a real strategic investment in the Lethbridge area to provide further officers for this team to go after organized crime.
Now, some jurisdictions in the United States have brought forth body cams that local law enforcement have to wear. Any chance we can maybe see mandatory body cams being worn by police throughout the province?
Well, you know what? This is a really interesting technology, and we're doing a consultation right now on the future of the Police Act, as well as the future of police policy in the province of Alberta. And our plan is to have some answers on this later this year and into the fall of next year regarding the future of those areas. But I've seen some of these technologies. I'm not sure if you remember the show Cops back in the day in the 90s, where you'd have them going with the police service, and they'd actually kind of narrate their life. Oh, we're pulling up here. We got a situation. I've seen some of these body camera technologies where the police will actually narrate their life as to what they're doing in the situation to provide better evidence for court. So I got this call, I come in, and it has the ability potentially to create a better accountability for the police, but also better evidence for the courts as well. So we're giving it a serious look right now in the province of Alberta.
Doug, oftentimes when there is a divorce, dads struggle to see their kids. Is it possible to reform family court without the Family Lawyers Association lobbying against it? I mean, apparently it's a billion-dollar business that hurts families and fathers and only benefits lawyers financially.
Well, it's one of those things where we have to make sure that the justice system works for Albertans. And I get letters every single day from parents that are going through a family system right now that is just not working for them. And they feel as though it's actually made their relationship with their children, it's damaged their family unit, even when they're trying to get along with their former spouse and trying to find some way to work together. So we were listening to that. And some of the things too is that some of these issues shouldn't be in the court system at all. Like there's ways that you could actually deal with family issues outside of a court process that would probably be far smoother from a process standpoint. It would probably cause less acrimony between the parents as they kind of try and find their new normal. And really, we're looking for some solutions there to help save people money too. Because in many of these instances, the person that profits is the lawyer. And it really should be about what's in the best interest of the family and the kids.
Legal Aid Alberta introduced a new initiative called Advance Appearance Duty Council, which allows people to prepare for court by phone or email instead of making a trip to the courthouse in person. Now, it's temporary until August 28th. Doug, Legal Aid says this was important to have during the pandemic since the Alberta courts reopened. Your thoughts?
You know what? During this pandemic, we've actually had an amazing amount of advancement in technology use, video conferences, different ways that we can get our court system continuing to function in a pandemic. And a lot of these things are actually really useful tools that we should look at keeping for the long term. And I think it also helps level the playing field because quite often legal services get concentrated in Calgary and Edmonton, and the bigger, the Court of Appeal matters, things like that. But by using video technology, there's no reason why a lawyer in Lethbridge or Tabor or Medicine Hat couldn't be able to provide those same services that are provided in the bigger cities, and it helps level that playing field. So we're looking at lots of different ways to keep technology use kind of at a premium in our court system.
Alberta Justice Minister Doug Schweitzer, thanks for joining me today from Calgary.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me on.
On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless and thanks so much for watching.